Alright, in this video I want to talk about two different things. I have these three tabs up to talk about something briefly, and I have these 6 tabs up to talk about something else. Now, it's not like anything in depth here, just a couple things I wanted to talk about and see what comes of it. The first thing I want to talk about that has to do with these 3 tabs has to do with people talking about there being a 14-year tribulation. Now, I'm not saying there is or isn't. I'm saying that I'm willing to hear them out and look into it, because I know God uses people in different ways, and He gives different people different light that they're supposed to use, and they shine that light. And I listen to them, and I'll hear them out, and if there's something to it, I'll grab a hold of it, right? The Holy Spirit talks to me, shows me that all this is adding up. I'll be like, all right, there's something here, and I'll grab a hold of it. If not, it's like, no, and toss it aside. So when somebody's saying, oh, 14-year tribulation, I don't just dismiss them, right? Because Proverbs tells us that it is folly for someone to judge something before they hear it out, right? So if somebody comes up with something and they're saying, hey, this is this, and yada, 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 I'll hear them out. Because maybe God showed them something. I don't know. Right? I could be wrong. I could be misunderstanding things. I know I don't have 100% of the truth, and I don't have 100% comprehension of that truth. You know, we got to stay humble. We got to hear people out. Like a lot of this rapture stuff and this tribulation stuff, I listen to other people and put things together. I listen to a bunch of different people, and I read on my own and try to see if anything comes together. But I don't quite see that all too clearly. I see the rapture clear, but the time frame of the tribulation, like 7-year period, I can see a 3.5-year period, and I'm willing to hear people out when they say a 14-year period. Now, something like I said, I need to look into, because I can't quite say anything about it other than a couple things that I was listening to and was thinking about. And that was that in Genesis, we have Joseph, who interprets the Pharaoh's dream, and that there's 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. So we have 2 7-year periods, which would be the 14 years. So it's like, okay, you know, we're told the end from the beginning, and Genesis is the beginning, and we're told about this here. So, you know, there's something to it. We also read Genesis about Jacob, right? He works 7 years to get what he's hoping to be Rachel, but he gets Leah. So then he works 7 more years to get Rachel. And there you can also see a plenty and a famine as well, because with Leah, she was fruitful and bore children, but Rachel didn't. She was barren for a while, right? So you can see the 2 7-year periods there. And then there was a lot of people talking around 2014, 2015 about these 2 heifers, these 2 cows that were born with 7s on their forehead. And it's 2 7s, so 2 periods of 7, and it's 14, right? So we see that again. And I was like, okay. I can see why you would see 14, right? But I need more conclusive things to really solidify this. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look more into it, right? Because I was seeing how it looks like there's a 3.5-year period, because in Revelation, we read about 3.5 years. And at the end of Daniel, we hear about 3.5 years. That's cut off at the end. So I was like, yeah, there's this 3.5-year period. But you could also take the 3.5-year periods, and it could be separate times. And you could potentially come together and end up getting 14 years, right? If you have 4 3.5-year periods, you get 14 years. It's like, okay, that's potentially something that's here. So that's what I was going to just look at real quick before I go over to this other subject. And in Revelation 11 is where we first see a period of 3.5 years. It talks about measuring the temple, and it mentions that the outside the courtyard is going to be given over to the Gentiles for 42 months. So if you have a 30-day month, 42 months is 3.5 years, and that would equal the same as what it says here, 1,203 days. So here we have two mentions of a 3.5 year period, right? Because if you multiplied 42 months by 30 days, you would get 1,203 days. So it's two 3.5 year periods. These could be back-to-back 3.5 year periods. So you could get 7 years, right? Or it could be the same period of time, just described differently, right? Something to definitely think about. Some people even take this to be a day for a year. So each one of these days is a year. And some interesting things have been shown there. But I don't box it in like that because we read about the millennium, which is 1,000 years, and everybody says, yeah, it's a 1,000-year reign, but nobody interprets that as a day for a year, because that would be something like 360,000 years or somewhere along there, right? So I'll stick to this just being a day for a year. Or I mean, not a day for a year, being literal time frame here, 42 months, 1,203 days, so 3.5 year periods, right? And there is mention again about 3 days and a half, which if you took day for a year would be 3.5 years. But I think these are literal days at the end of this. Seems to make a little bit more sense, right? Because then you have to explain literal years of 1,203 years, and then you get a couple of mentions of 3.5 years because of the 3 days and a half, right? So something to think about here. You know, that could be, right? But we should just chill on that for a second and focus on every time it's talking about 3.5 years. So we get it twice mentioned here. Potentially that would equal 7 years, right? I don't think it's mentioned again in chapter 11. But when we come to chapter 12, it is mentioned again. And it talks about this woman being taken up. Well, she's not taken up. Her man-child is taken up, right? And there's a place where the woman flees for 1,203 days, the same kind of time mentioned in Revelation 11. So a 3.5 year period. And it seems as though that when the man-child is taken up, there's war in heaven. Michael versus the dragon, right? And the dragon is the devil, the Satan, who deceives the whole world. He's cast out, and he realizes that he has a short time. So he goes after the woman, where she goes into the wilderness for a times and a half a time. That's a time is a year, times is multiple, so 2 years, and half a time is a half a year, so 3.5 years. The same time frame as the 1,203 days. And this seems to be talking about the same event because she's fleeing into the wilderness for 3.5 years. Why? Well, it tells you why. The dragon is trying to devour her, destroy her. So it talks about when this happens, she's flown into the wilderness for those 3.5 years. So it seems like it's talking about the same period of time. So you could say, oh, here's 7 years here, but it seems to be talking about the same period of time. But like I said, again, who knows? Maybe wrong. Maybe this is not the same 3.5 year period of time. Maybe it's 2 different periods. So right there you have 14 years. I'm not seeing that, but maybe there's something that shines light on this to reveal that. But then there's a problem. We have another mention of the 3.5 years, so that would actually end up adding up to 17.5 years if it's talking about separate times each time it mentions it, right? So it's talking about this first beast that comes up out of the sea, and it has 42 months time given to it. Right? And I think this is the last time the 3.5 year period is mentioned. There's no mention of 7-year period at all in Revelation. It's just 3.5 years that keeps being mentioned. So the main thing to take from it is this 3.5 years. If they're separate times, it adds up to 17.5 years. If it's 7 years, well, then you need to be able to divide which 3.5 years is the first 3.5 years and what 3.5 years is the second 3.5 years. I don't see a real distinction showing that. But I just want to talk about that real briefly because there's people talking about a 14-year tribulation. I'm willing to hear them out, but like I said, looking at this, I do not know how I could take these mentions of these 3.5 year periods and to get 14 out of it. You see, where it says 40 in 2 months, right? I would automatically connect that to where it says 40 in 2 months here. It's saying it the same way, right? So while the temple is being measured, we got the 2 witnesses going out while this beast is around, and they are doing their thing for 40 in 2 months, the same amount of time that beast is given to do its thing. But you also notice that the beast receives a deadly wound, and a second beast makes an image to it, that they all should worship that. And it seems as though that has something to do with these 2 witnesses and then being killed. Like the beast, that's when he receives his deadly wound and he comes back. A son of a perdition comes up. We've got the second beast. Everybody's being forced to now worship this first beast. And that's when he gets rid of these 2 witnesses, because he needs them gone to get people to now worship him. Right? So I could see how this is the first 3.5 year period of a 7-year tribulation, the 42 months and these witnesses, and it has to do with this first beast. And then when it receives its deadly wound, there's something going on here. And there seems to be some kind of potential second rapture going on in the middle of the tribulation. Maybe this is when the 144,000 are taken up, as it says here that these 2 witnesses, they rise after 3.5 days and they're taken up. Let's see if I can find that real quick. Yeah, right here at verse 12. And they heard a voice from heaven saying, "Come up hither," and they ascended up to heaven. Right? So it seems as though there is some kind of tribulation going on. I mean, not tribulation, rapture going on in the midst of the tribulation. And that's what it seems like is going on right there. And yeah. Okay, now in the second half of this video, I'm going to get into something I heard while watching TOL End Times, Thinking Out Loud End Times. And Chooch had one of his friends on there that he has on now and then, was asking him some questions. And that friend of his brought up 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 about the day of the Lord won't come except there come a falling away first. And he said that this falling away is not a falling away of faith, but the actual rapture itself. He was saying that a better translation would be the rapture. Now, I cannot say I agree. I'm willing to hear people out and look into what they say, but I can't say I agree with them after taking a look into this. Just that the context of what's being said here is telling you, let no one deceive you, right? That there's going to be a falling away first, that the man of sin will be revealed, the son of perdition, right? And Paul talked a lot about how people have fallen away. He even got upset, I think it's with the Galatians, saying how soon they moved on to another gospel. right? He's like, why do I have to come back and redo this? He's not even gone yet, like as in dead, martyred, and he's having people already fall into another gospel, right? You can see in like Peter, James, John, and Jude talking about the people falling away and how when they're gone, it's pretty much just going to fall into, I guess, iniquity, lawlessness, right? Sin's going to abound and whatnot. They're going to fall away from the faith. I guess that's the main thing, falling away from the faith, falling away from grace, turning the grace of God into something else, right? And that's pretty much what they did. They took the gospel of grace and they went after another gospel. And that's what I see when I read this. They're falling away because we look up what the word here is and it says apostasia. Let's look up the definition in a new tab here. And it tells you defection, revolt, apostasy. And it says here some more definitions here. And it says leave, depart. And I can see how you can say that as a rapture of sorts. But it's not the same word that Paul uses to indicate rapture, being caught up, right? It's a different word. And here we can see away from, stand, properly, departure, implying desertion, apostasy, literally a leaving from a previous standing. And that's where you would get what you would see as falling away from the faith, going after another gospel, completely destroying the gospel of grace and turning it into lasciviousness, right? And that seems to make sense, though I can see how you could take little pieces of that and apply it to some kind of rapture. I don't think if we take the word in its actual meaning, in its whole, that you would take it to mean a rapture. It seems as though they are falling away from actual faith. I think it gives you some instances of that here, falling away, defection, apostasy. I'm just looking at it a little bit more here. It says here, defection from truth. And I cannot read that transliterations and what have you. But anyway, yeah. It doesn't seem to be like the same kind of word that would be used to say that Enoch was raptured or translated, or Elijah was apostasia. No, it's not the word you would use to say someone was raptured or translated, to say that they were caught up. Like what this is saying is some kind of defection or revolt, as in you're turning against your country, right? That's what it's making it sound out to be. So I was looking at, what other words do we find for falling away in the New Testament? Let's take a look at it to see, if there's any way we could see that this means rapture. Because like I said, I can be wrong. And I want to see if, there's anything to it. Because if there's something to that being the rapture first, that's a big piece of evidence, proof, right? But I don't think that's what it is. Not saying there's not a pre-trib rapture, just saying I don't think that's what is being said there. So I decided to go to Jude, where it talks about falling. It's another time where it brings up falling. And Jude, he pretty much is talking about people falling away from the faith, right? He even says you turn the gospel of grace, or the grace of God, into lasciviousness, right here. Turning the grace of God into lasciviousness. And he's talking about the people falling away from the faith. He's trying to hold them to persevere. And then he says that someone to keep you from falling. Because, that's not what you want to do. You don't want to fall away, right? Yet this word is different. Aptaistos. We'll open that up in its own little tab here real quick. It's obviously not the same word. Over here we got 646, apostasia. This is 679, aptasistos. And it's without stumbling, falling, sure-footed. Right, so this is not the same meaning, right? And it makes sense because with this, what Jude is saying, he's like, keep you from falling because you're like on a tightrope. You're trying not to fall. While over here in Thessalonians, these people intentionally go away, whether they want to or they're deceived into sin, they leave the faith one way or another, right? But for those who are trying not to, he's saying, unto him that's able to keep you from falling. So if you're relying on God, your Savior, he'll keep you from falling away. So it's two different words, so I didn't really get a good sense of apostasy meaning anything other than falling away from the faith, right? Because I need something else to say, hey, this word is used to show some kind of rapture or taken away. Not able to find that. Not saying that it's not there. That's just something I haven't seen. And then we come to Revelation chapter 8, and it talks about Babylon fallen is fallen. Again, a different word to fall, right? So can't quite bring that connection. Some translations in verse 13 talk about some kind of departure or falling away of sorts, but not here in the King James, so I couldn't really use that. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to look at such things where it talks about departure, right? And it's talking about Jesus departing, and I was like, is this apostasy? And it's like, no, this is apurk-amahi, to go away, go after. So, nope, departed, as if you're leaving, to go somewhere else, that is not apostasia. So, can't really say it's departing. And then over here in 1 Timothy, where is it here? I think it's talking about departing at first verse, I think it is. Yeah, depart from the faith. He goes, now the Spirit that speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith. That's where I was like, oh, so depart could mean apostasy, right? These people are apostatizing from the faith. Is that what's being said? And no. To lead away, to depart from. 868. Aphistami. To lead away, to depart from. And they're being seduced, like I said, seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Right? They're being misled by false doctrine, false teachings. So it's like, okay, I'm not seeing the apostasy there, so that kind of sucked. And then I came over here. Here's the last one that really stuck out. I was trying to focus on New Testament where it's Greek and not going so much at all into the Old Testament. So I was just focusing on this. And in 2 Timothy chapter 2, talking about the resurrection past already. And where is it that I was looking at? I think it was here at Erd. To miss the mark. I don't remember why I was bringing up Erd, but it was actually some of the stuff that was coming up when I was looking for departed and apostasy, and it had this connection here to Ashtakio, to miss the mark, so they didn't quite follow the faith as it was meant to be followed or something along those lines, right? And it was like it was saying here in the context, they erred, saying that the resurrection is past already, right? And that was part of what was going on in 2 Thessalonians, people saying that they miss the resurrection and the rapture, saying it already passed, now the day of the Lord is at hand. He's like, no, it has not happened yet. And he seems to be saying that, yeah, there's some people who are erring, teaching that it already happened. So this seems to be something that's a little more common than we would even think. We have the apostles walking around teaching, not only teaching, but they were doing miracles. And granted, at a time their miracles were stopped, but you would still think you would be listening to these people. But no, these people go and start listening to the others. Right when these apostles are still walking around, they're listening to other people and their teachings instead. It's crazy. So it makes sense that without any apostles around, that today people would be going after whatever they feel like going after just because they want to believe it. But anyway, through this just quick little study, I cannot say that this falling away is the rapture, right? We can even real quick go to, I can't remember off the top of my head where it says caught up. Caught up. I'm just going to have to search it. Caught up. I think I will check out 2 Corinthians 12:13. Just go right here real quick. I think it's in 1st or 2nd Thessalonians where he says, we're caught up to be with him. He's such a man. Caught up right here. Harpazo, to seize, catch up, to snatch. And that's the same word people use, that's the word rapture, harpazo. And that's not what we read in 2nd Thessalonians. That we read apostasia. It doesn't mean the same thing as harpazo here, to be caught up. And that's, I think he just wants it to say that. And it wasn't so much that it said what he was saying it said. That's what he wanted it to say. And I get that, because that's what happens a lot of times. We want something to say something, so that's what we read into it, and we put our own belief into what we're reading. But I'm going to go real quick and go to caught up to be with him in the clouds. I'm not sure if that's word for word, but here we go. Yes, 1 Thessalonians 4:17. Let's just see the word there. And I think this is where it's harpazo as well. 1 Thessalonians 4:17, and let's go to the Strong's Concordance. I'll probably start using more eSword, since I don't have to use the online. And those which are alive will be caught up, harpazo, snatched away, right? That's not what we read if we go all the way back to 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. The falling away is not a caught up, it's not harpazo, it's apostasia. So when he said that, that's when I stopped watching, because I was like, what? You're just kind of making up what you want to believe. But I was like, I'm stopping this, I'm taking a look at it, because I know, I was like, maybe I'm wrong. Have I really looked into it? Maybe he looked into it more than I have. So I looked into it, and it's not saying what he's saying it says, or what he thinks it says, or what he hoping it says. And that's not good. You don't want to be teaching something that's not right. Because you see what's going to happen when you teach somebody something like this. Oh, the falling away is the rapture. Guess what? They're going to run into somebody who goes, what are you talking about? This is apostasia. Harpazo is caught up, the rapture. This is a completely different word. And they're relying on this to prove the rapture. They're going to be like, what? This is a falling away from the faith. And that can right there trigger them to be like, well, all of what I thought was true is not true. There is no pre-trib rapture. And you just sent them on a downward spiral where they fall away from the faith. right? That's worst case scenario. Maybe they study and they look into it and be like, oh, okay, I was wrong. But that's not always the case. People follow men. And if you're going to be teaching God's word, you need to be doing it right so you don't lead people astray. So anytime you realize you're doing something wrong, you need to humble yourself and you need to tell everybody, yeah, I was wrong. It's not fun to eat humble pie, but it's good for you. You got to eat the humble pie. So what's best for you? It's better to eat the humble pie here. It's gross and nasty and just force it down than to have to face God being prideful and not admitting you're wrong, right? So with that being said, thanks for watching and take care.